चढ़दीकला टाइम टीवी नॉर्थ अमरीका देख रहे सारे दर्शकों का वर्ल्ड पंजाबी न्यूज़ ਦੇ स्वागत है। मैं ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਰਿਦਮ। खबरों की शुरुआत करने तो पहले एक नज़र मारते हैं कुछ खास हेडलाइंस ते। सरहदी पाबंदियां खोले जाने ते माहरा ने दी चेतावनी, कहा पाबंदियां खोले जाने नाल ओंटारियो विच आ सकती है चौथी लहर। बार्डर खुलते ही कनेडा विच उमड़ी अमरीका वासियों की भीड़, नायगरा रीजन वधिया टूरिस्टां दा इकट्ठ। बिजनेस कम्यूनिटी वालों वैक्सीन पासपोर्ट की की गई हिमायत, वैक्सीन पासपोर्ट महामारी तो बचन लई होणगे सहाई। ते हुण खबरां विस्तार नाल। माहरां दा मनना है कि कनेडियन बार्डरां उत्ते पाबंदियां विच ढिल देण नाल ओंटारियो विच हुण कोविड-19 की चौथी वेव आके रहेगी। कई माहरां दा तां इत्थों तक मनना है कि कनेडा विच चौथी वेव आ चुकी है। जिक्रयोग है कि सरहद खोलण दा फैसला कुछ समा पहलां उदों लिया गया सी जदों कनेडा ते अमरीका विच कोविड-19 के मामलों विच कमी पाई गई सी।
In many provinces in Canada, we're seeing an uptick in cases. So at a time when cases are increasing, it seems that timing, is really poor.
For me, the biggest takeaway is that we still have time to act on climate change, that we're not sort of past the point of no return. There's still things we can do to mitigate and avoid the worst effects.
Amazing. I haven't seen her since what? 2019, yeah.
I have a lot of loved ones in Canada, so I was looking forward to coming back.
Obviously, other European countries, it's also allowed this kind of entry for fully vaccinated people, especially. So I'm glad that Canada did it, so I can see my grandparents and, finally spend time with them.
And so, accepting in Americans where, in the States, they have a far higher rate of COVID right now. It certainly is very concerning. But of course, the measures they put in place, making sure those are important measures.
We've come a long way in being able to understand what the factors are and the variables are that we must need to look at, but there's still too many unknowns. We don't know exactly how the people will behave who come across. We don't have a specific profile for people who are going to come across the border now, or what will happen down the line. From today forward, after you greet those people in the airport, we have to see to what effect.
That is probably not going to be a good time to open up to international travelers. The caveat there, of course, is that if we are able to vaccinate another 10% of our population in Canada, I don't think we'd be home free with respect to COVID, but we'd be in a much better place.
Canada's quarantine hotel program has also been shuttered.
I think we're going to be looking at the COVID hotels as a case and shaking our heads for a while because I don't think that there's any single answer to how they got there, how effective they were, and how they will play out even now that they're not here. What's the effect of taking them out?
एक साल तो बाद कनेडा सरकार वालों सरहद खोले जाने तो बाद पहले दिन ही अमरीकन टूरिस्ट दा नायगरा रीजन विच ताता लग गया। टूरिस्ट वहीरा घत के नायगरा फॉल्स के दृश्यों का आनंद मानन, इस इलाके के होरना खूबसूरत नज़ारियां का मजा लैन ते नेड़ली वाइन कंट्री का लुत्फ उठाने लई कनेडा पहुंच गए।
Yeah, we encourage people to come and see, honestly, yeah.
We're definitely going in the right direction, but I got to tell you, for a long time it was a dim light at the end of a very long tunnel.
Now, our business went to literally zero. It just started to really creep back for us. And it's all domestic. So right now, it's a 100-mile radius, Toronto coming here to Niagara Falls, Canada right now. That's it. That's the market.
It is terrible for me. I came here in hopes of starting a life with her and starting a dream, and it's very hard to go every day without having her in my life. Oh, it's terrible. I had no hopes of, no energy to do anything, and just give up. That's all I want.
So it pains me all the time to know that he's there.
We reached here at 5:55 in the morning.
Worth the wait. We're going to our cottage.
Just moving for school.
It's been almost 2 years. So grandparents, great-grandparents for the kids.
After 1 year, I'm going to visit my family.
I'm excited. I'm beyond emotional.
To me, we're not ready for this widespread travel. We also have to make sure that this variant isn't just particularly hard on children. And to me, that question hasn't been fully answered yet.
If you're going to take a first step in opening the border, this would be an appropriate first step to do so. This is about as safe as it gets and as cautious as it gets.
टोरंटो च एक बार फिर तो गोलीबारी की घटना सामने आई है। हाईवे 400 नेड़े 3 गोलियां लगन कारण एक व्यक्ति गंभीर रूप विच जख्मी हो गया। इस समय वो हस्पताल विच जेरे इलाज है। देश अंदर गन हिंसा ते काबू पाउण लई सख्त कानून की मंग भी की जा रही है।
There's
things to do on a provincial and a municipal level, but the law on firearms is a federal law. A handgun is a restricted weapon. It should be very hard to get licensed to have one.
Our neighboring countries, just outside the border, which is a very, very permeable border, there are more guns than people. And guns are, crisscrossing the border all the time. What we're seeing in Montreal must be tackled down by police activities, and I mean police repression, because it's criminality at a very, very dangerous level.
Right now, he just have to show his license. The seller will call the RCMP saying that I saw the license of Mr. Tel and Tel. Each year, we don't do something. It's more and more complex to reinstore new controls because there's more and more handguns, more and more restricted weapons in the streets.
ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਕਿਊਬਿਕ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਕਾਇਮ ਕੀਤੇ ਗਏ ਨੇ ਦੇਸ਼ ਦੇ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਵੈਕਸੀਨ ਪਾਸਪੋਰਟ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਦੀ ਹਮਾਇਤ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੈ। ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਚੈਂਬਰ ਆਫ ਕਾਮਰਸ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਵੈਕਸੀਨ ਪਾਸਪੋਰਟ ਜਾਂ ਡਿਜੀਟਲ ਵੈਕਸੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਸਰਟੀਫਿਕੇਟ ਭਵਿੱਖ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਹਾਮਾਰੀ ਤੋਂ ਬਚਣ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਦਦ ਕਰਨਗੇ।
We don't know if our businesses are going to survive. So it's been really tough. And yeah. Right now, all we can do is keep trying. If a vaccine passport would help be able to keep businesses open, especially if we do, potentially go into another wave, then, I mean, let's do it.
If cases start to rise, if hospitalizations start to rise, if the healthcare system is getting threatened with being overwhelmed, and you want to keep things going, that's a potential option to do so.
The unvaccinated population is really going to drive healthcare demand. Really what we do today in terms of making sure we get people vaccinated, even that first dose for people, is going to define what happens in a few months in terms of our healthcare demand.
Everyone get vaccinated, and then we can get through this.
Yeah, I'm for the passports at this point. Yeah, just because it's the pandemic, We need ID for everything now. So identification, we need it to go on a plane. I'm going on to Calgary tomorrow, so I'm going to need to show ID. If you got a wallet, you got a card in it, what's the big deal, right?
We want to keep all of us as safe and healthy as possible. And if somebody doesn't have it, I think there are lots of places they should not be admitted to. So I'm in favor.
Well, I think there's already a passport for vaccination when you travel to some country. It's yellow, I believe. The one I have is yellow, and you need it for yellow fevers. You need it for typhoid if you go to some African countries. So it's not a new invention. Using it within a province, I think some people are going to be upset because it sort of impacts their freedom, but I don't think it's a bad idea until we get full control of these pandemics and people really are convinced that vaccination is the way to go. I'm not opposed to it. From a business perspective, I can see some restaurants are going to be challenged because they're going to have to police it, and it's going to be difficult to say no to some customers and yes to other customers, but in general, I think it's a good idea.
ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ ਦੇ ਜੰਗਲਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਲੱਗੀ ਅੱਗ ਰੁਕਣ ਦਾ ਨਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੈ ਰਹੀ। ਵਾਤਾਵਰਨ ਮਾਹਰਾਂ ਅਨੁਸਾਰ ਜੇਕਰ ਸਮਾਂ ਰਹਿੰਦਿਆਂ ਇਸ ਉੱਤੇ ਕਾਬੂ ਨਾ ਪਾਇਆ ਗਿਆ ਤਾਂ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਸਮੇਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਥੋਂ ਦੇ ਤਾਪਮਾਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਵਾਧਾ ਹੋਵੇਗਾ। ਕਈ ਇਲਾਕਿਆਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਾਣੀ ਦੀ ਘਾਟ ਹੋਣ ਕਾਰਨ ਸਥਿਤੀ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਖਰਾਬ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਅੱਗ ਦੇ ਕਹਿਰ ਨੂੰ ਰੋਕਣ ਦੀਆਂ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ ਬਾਵਜੂਦ ਅਜੇ ਵੀ 250 ਤੋਂ ਵੱਧ ਥਾਵਾਂ ਉੱਪਰ ਅੱਗ ਜਾਰੀ ਹੈ।
Good day. I'd like just to provide a brief update on the current fire status and talk about some of the challenges and successes that we've had over the past few days. So since the start of the season, the BC Wildfire Service has responded to about 1,312 wildfires. And that's resulted in just over 556,000 hectares of area burned. There's currently 249 active wildfires burning in BC. 34 of those are wildfires of note. So 173 of these are due to natural causes and 17 of them are due to human-caused fires. The 10-year average for this time of year is 760 fires for a total of about 114,000 hectares burned. I'm really pleased to report it's been a week of steady progress. And over the past 7 days, the average numbers of new fires per day has remained at around or below 7, and the total number of fires burning at any one time has remained below 250. Visibility remains a challenge due to wildfire smoke and has been hampering our aviation operations. The safety of our staff is always the #1 priority, and we need to follow Transport Canada regulations when we're flying. And even with those visibility challenges, we've flown over 4,000 hours with our air tanker fleet and over 23,000 hours with our helicopters. The rain received over the weekend has curbed the fire behavior, but not enough to make only for a short period of time, allowing our crews to make progress on those incidents. However, the amount of rain was not enough to make any long-term impact, and we'll see a return to those extremely dry conditions to the southern interior today and tomorrow. And conditions for the rest of the week remain variable across the province. It's only early August, and there's still a significant amount of fire on the landscape. Everyone needs to remain diligent. I'd like to take a moment to thank all British Columbians for their diligence and their caution. The vast majority of new starts over the long weekend were due to natural causes. Of the very small handful of human-caused wildfires, all have been declared out, they're under control, or they're being held. I just wanted to send out a reminder to everyone that all BC Wildfire Service personnel and contractors are provided with personal protective equipment. This is related to their jobs and all the COVID-19 related supplies. Personnel adhere to these COVID public health orders and guidelines to ensure that operations can continue safely throughout the province.
ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰਧਾਨ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਜਸਟਿਨ ਟਰੂਡੋ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਚੋਣਾਂ ਕਰਵਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਤਿਆਰੀਆਂ ਵਿੰਡ ਦਿੱਤੀਆਂ ਗਈਆਂ ਨੇ। ਇਸ ਤੇ ਟਿੱਪਣੀ ਕਰਦਿਆਂ ਐਨਡੀਪੀ ਆਗੂ ਜਗਮੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਮੁਲਕ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਬਹੁਤ ਵਧੀਆ ਢੰਗ ਨਾਲ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਚੌਥੀ ਵੇਵ ਦਾ ਖਤਰਾ ਵੀ ਬਣਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੈ। ਇਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਹਾਲਾਤਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਚੋਣਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਣੀਆਂ ਚਾਹੀਦੀਆਂ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੋਸ਼ ਲਗਾਇਆ ਕਿ ਪ੍ਰਧਾਨ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਟਰੂਡੋ ਪੂਰਨ ਬਹੁਮਤ ਦੀ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਨੂੰ ਚੋਣਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਧੱਕਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਜੋ ਕਿ ਸਰਾਸਰ ਗਲਤ ਹੈ।
Justin Trudeau is planning an election. And as I've said before, it is the wrong thing to do. With the risk of a fourth wave potentially, the focus should be on getting people the help they need, getting everyone vaccinated. On top of that, we know that Justin Trudeau has been putting out this idea that Parliament doesn't work. It's completely false. We have shown again and again that Parliament does work. When Justin Trudeau wants to cut help to people, he has teamed up with the Conservatives to do that. And they voted against Pharmacare. They voted against taxing the ultra-rich together, and they teamed up together to vote against our motion to remove profit from long-term care. They've shown that they can work together with the Conservatives when it comes to hurting people. And with us, New Democrats, we have forced this government to deliver more help for more people. We're proud of the fact that we're able to double serve and bring in more help for small businesses with increased wage subsidy. We were able to help students and bring in a paid sick leave. We were able to fight and push for more help for more people. And yes, it took negotiation, but that's what Canadians expect. So again, I want to call out that Justin Trudeau's only reason for having an election is to increase power, and that is not in the interest of Canadians. We are ready to fight an election if it's called, but it's not the right thing to do. And finally, the IPCC report that's come out is very, very troubling. We know that we are in a climate crisis, but the scientists at the United Nations have come up with a report again highlighting how dangerous the situation is. We've seen the forest fires in BC and Northern Ontario. We've seen extreme weather and flooding here in the Atlantic provinces. We've seen droughts. We know that the climate crisis is impacting us today, and we need to fight it by reducing our emissions, and we can do that by creating thousands of jobs that help us reduce emissions. We can take on the big polluters, and we can protect our planet. And with that, I want to say thank you once again for being here. And I'm ready for any questions you might have. Encore un grand merci pour votre présence et je suis prêt pour vos questions.
ਉਧਰ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੇ ਆਗੂ ਔਟੂਲ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਵੀ ਪਿੰਡੂ ਇਲਾਕਿਆਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਵਸਦੇ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਹਾਈ ਸਪੀਡ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਟ ਮੁਹੱਈਆ ਕਰਵਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਪਲਾਨ ਸਾਂਝਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਪ੍ਰਧਾਨ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਟਰੂਡੋ ਇਹ ਸਹੂਲਤ 2030 ਤੱਕ ਦੇਣ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ, ਪਰ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ 9 ਸਾਲ ਤੱਕ ਇੰਤਜ਼ਾਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ। ਔਟੂਲ ਨੇ ਪਿੰਡੂ ਇਲਾਕਿਆਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੁੱਖ ਧਾਰਾ ਨਾਲ ਜੋੜਨ ਲਈ ਲੋਕਲ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਨੂੰ ਆਰਥਿਕ ਸਹਾਇਤਾ ਦੇਣ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਹੀ ਹੈ।
As the last year has made abundantly clear to families, to small businesses, to communities, high-speed internet is essential for Canadians to learn, to work, and to connect with loved ones. Justin Trudeau's current federal target is universal high-speed internet by 2030. Canadians cannot wait 9 years. They deserve action now. Ontario and Quebec have moved ahead on their own. They're tired of waiting. Too many Canadians still lack adequate internet access. We will put a stop to the endless delays, bureaucracy, and we will become a true partner to the provinces, delivering broadband across the country. We'll speed up the spectrum auction process to get more spectrum into use and apply use it or lose it provisions to ensure that spectrum is developed, particularly in rural parts of our country. I believe that all Canadians, in rural Canada just as much as in our larger cities, deserve access to high-speed internet so that they can connect to the world. Canada's Conservatives will make this a reality. And that's just the beginning of our plan for rural Canada. We will appoint a Minister of Rural Affairs to Cabinet who will ensure that Canadians living outside the big cities have a voice at the table. We will set aside a portion of federal infrastructure funds so that they can be targeted specifically for projects in rural areas. We will ensure that Canada's tourism strategy supports rural tourism and encourages Canadians and visitors from around the world to explore remote parts of the country, including hidden gems in Canada, like Prince Edward County, like Quinte. These are gems we need to share. Local and regional media are also key to keeping rural communities connected. Thanks to some with us today. We will significantly reduce the amount the Liberal government spends on advertising with big foreign tech companies like Twitter, and instead direct federal ad dollars to Canadian media. And we have a plan to tackle rural crime. Too many politicians and commentators who live in our big cities talk as if crime is less and less of a concern in Canada because they ignore, they don't understand, or they simply don't care about what is happening outside of our big urban centers. It's time for a government that will ensure that families living in small towns and in rural areas feel safe in their homes and on their farms. We will tackle rural crime and ensure that criminals who take advantage of someone's distance from emergency services.
ਵਿੰਟਰ 올림픽ਸ ਫਰਵਰੀ 2022 ਨੂੰ ਚੀਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਣ ਜਾ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਨੇ। ਇਸ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਇੱਕ ਸਰਵੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਆਇਆ ਹੈ ਜਿਸ ਵਿੱਚ 10 ਵਿੱਚੋਂ 6 ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨਸ ਨੇ ਸਹਿਮਤੀ ਪ੍ਰਗਟਾਈ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਨੂੰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਖੇਡਾਂ ਦਾ ਬਾਈਕਾਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਮੰਨਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਸਦਕਾ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਮਾਈਕਲਸ ਦੀ ਨਜ਼ਰਬੰਦੀ ਦਾ ਰੋਸ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਜਿਤਾ ਸਕੇਗਾ। ਇਸ ਸੰਬੰਧੀ ਮਾਹਿਰਾਂ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਗਏ ਨੇ।
Resolution in the House of Commons, I think some 266 in favor and no one against, to ask the International Olympic Committee to move the Olympics to somewhere else. Well, that ship has sailed. It's too late in the game to have Olympics in early 2022 in a different venue. The question now is, should there be a boycott? One type of boycott would be a diplomatic boycott, which would simply mean that there would be no high-level officials, governmental representatives present, but the athletes would still compete. The other sort would be a complete boycott where none of the athletes would show up. And that's complicated. As you said, it would appear that a majority of Canadians support or somewhat support that stance. However, when you have power in Winter Olympics, hundreds of athletes who spent 4 years in preparation for that event, that's a heavy cost, heavy burden to ask them to support. Whether it's the two Michaels, our two Michaels, whether it's Hong Kong or Xinjiang, there's a long litany of complaints that the Western countries have, some more than others, but in general, the view in Western countries is contrary, is critical of China. It's not true of the whole world, but it's certainly true of the West. What will be interesting to see is what are our allies doing. As a former diplomat, it's sometimes problematical if you're a boycott of one. It's another thing if you have, as we said in the business, good company. The United States' position will be key. I will not be surprised to see potentially a diplomatic boycott by the United States, something we might join in. But an entire boycott, the U.S. Biden administration so far has been wary of that sort of declaration. Their views may change, but to be alone, even with good cause, would be perhaps to isolate ourselves to some extent. On its best behavior in terms of new actions or decisions or things they might do that would exacerbate the question of participation in their Olympics. On the other hand, their views on Taiwan, on Hong Kong, on Xinjiang are fixed and solidified. They're not going to fundamentally change the human rights situation in China.
ਚੀਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਡਰੱਗ ਮਾਮਲੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਫੜੇ ਗਏ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਮੌਤ ਦੀ ਸਜ਼ਾ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਅਪੀਲ ਮੰਗਲਵਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਚੀਨ ਦੀ ਅਦਾਲਤ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਰੱਦ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਗਈ। ਰੋਬਰਟ ਸ਼ੈਲਨਬਰਗ ਨੂੰ ਨਵੰਬਰ 2018 ਵਿੱਚ ਨਸ਼ਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਸਮਗਲਿੰਗ ਦੇ ਮਾਮਲੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਫੜਿਆ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ ਤੇ ਕਥਿਤ ਤੌਰ ਉੱਤੇ ਇਸ ਮਾਮਲੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੋਸ਼ੀ ਵੀ ਠਹਿਰਾਇਆ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ। ਚੀਨ ਦੇ ਟੈਕਨੀਕਲ ਜੁਆਇੰਟ ਕੰਪਨੀ ਹੁਆਓ ਟੈਕਨੋਲੋਜੀ ਲਿਮਟਿਡ ਦੀ ਚੀਫ ਫਾਈਨੈਂਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਆਫੀਸਰ ਮੈਂਗ ਵਾਂਜੂਓ ਨੇ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੀ ਅਪੀਲ ਉੱਤੇ ਵੈਨਕੂਵਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਜ਼ਰਬੰਦ ਕੀਤੇ ਜਾਣ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਇਹ ਸਭ ਹੋਇਆ। ਚੀਨੀ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਉੱਤੇ ਵਾਂਜੂਓ ਨੂੰ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਦਬਾਅ ਪਾਉਣ ਦੇ ਬਾਵਜੂਦ ਜਦੋਂ ਕੰਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਣਿਆ ਤਾਂ ਜਨਵਰੀ 2019 ਵਿੱਚ ਅਚਾਨਕ ਸ਼ੈਲਨਬਰਗ ਦੀ ਸਜ਼ਾ ਵਧਾ ਕੇ ਮੌਤ ਦੀ ਸਜ਼ਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਤਬਦੀਲ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਗਈ। ਲਿਆਓਨਿੰਗ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਿੰਸ ਦੀ ਹਾਇਰ ਪੀਪਲਜ਼ ਕੋਰਟ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਸ਼ੈਲਨਬਰਗ ਦੀ ਇਹ ਅਪੀਲ ਆਖਦਿਆਂ ਹੋਇਆ ਖਾਰਜ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਗਈ ਕਿ ਸਜ਼ਾ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਢੁਕਵੀਂ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਹੇਠਲੀ ਅਦਾਲਤ ਦੀ ਕਾਰਵਾਈ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਸਹੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਦੇ ਦਾਇਰੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਹਿ ਕੇ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਇਹ ਮਾਮਲਾ ਮੁਲਾਂਕਣ ਲਈ ਚੀਨ ਦੀ ਸਰਵ ਉੱਚ ਅਦਾਲਤ ਨੂੰ ਭੇਜਿਆ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ। ਸੰਸਦ ਮੈਂਬਰ ਰੂਬੀ ਸਹੋਤਾ ਨੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ 'ਚ ਜੀਵ ਨਿਰਮਾਣ ਅਤੇ ਜੀਵਨ ਵਿਗਿਆਨ ਖੇਤਰ ਦੇ ਮੁੜ ਨਿਰਮਾਣ ਲਈ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਦੀ ਰਣਨੀਤੀ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਵੱਡਾ ਐਲਾਨ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੈ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੇ ਕੋਵਿਡ-19 ਵੈਕਸੀਨ ਮੋਹਰੀ ਕੰਪਨੀ ਮੋਡਰਨਾ ਨਾਲ ਇੱਕ ਸਹਿਮਤੀ ਪੱਤਰ MOU ਸਥਾਪਿਤ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੈ ਜਿਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੈਕਸੀਨ ਡਿਵੈਲਪਰ ਮੋਡਰਨਾ ਇੱਕ ਅਤੀ ਆਧੁਨਿਕ mRNA ਵੈਕਸੀਨ ਉਤਪਾਦ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਹੂਲਤ ਪ੍ਰਦਾਨ ਕਰੇਗਾ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਬਾਇਓ ਮੈਨੂਫੈਕਚਰਿੰਗ ਅਤੇ ਜੀਵਨ ਵਿਗਿਆਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰਭਾਵਸ਼ਾਲੀ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ। ਹਾਲਾਂਕਿ ਇਸ ਸੈਕਟਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਦਹਾਕਿਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਚੱਲੀ ਆ ਰਹੀ ਗਿਰਾਵਟ ਨੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਨੂੰ ਵੱਡੇ ਪੈਮਾਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਲਚਕਦਾਰ ਰਹਿਤ ਛੱਡ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਹੈ ਪਰ ਇੱਕ ਕੋਵਿਡ-19 ਟੀਕਾ ਤੇਜ਼ੀ ਨਾਲ ਤਿਆਰ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਬਾਇਓ ਮੈਨੂਫੈਕਚਰਿੰਗ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਸਮਰੱਥਾ ਰੱਖਦਾ ਹੈ। ਇਹ ਕਾਰਨ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਮੁੜ ਨਿਰਮਾਣ ਲਈ ਅੰਤ ਤੱਕ ਮਿਹਨਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਮਹਾਮਾਰੀ ਦੀ ਸ਼ੁਰੂਆਤ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ 'ਚ ਤੇਜ਼ ਰਣਨੀਤਿਕ ਕਾਰਵਾਈਆਂ ਟੀਕੇ ਇਲਾਜ ਅਤੇ ਬਾਇਓ ਮੈਨੂਫੈਕਚਰਿੰਗ ਲਈ $1.2 ਬਿਲੀਅਨ ਤੋਂ ਵੱਧ ਦਾ ਨਿਵੇਸ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾ ਚੁੱਕਾ ਹੈ। ਵਿਕਟੋਰੀਆ 'ਚ ਪਰਿਵਾਰਾਂ ਲਈ ਕੁਸ਼ਲ ਭਰੋਸੇਮੰਦ ਅਤੇ ਵਾਰਾ ਖਾਨਯੋਗ ਟ੍ਰਾਂਜ਼ਿਟ ਪ੍ਰਤੀ ਸੂਬਾਈ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰਤੀਬੱਧਤਾ ਦੇ ਹਿੱਸੇ ਵਜੋਂ 12 ਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਘੱਟ ਉਮਰ ਦੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ BC ਟ੍ਰਾਂਜ਼ਿਟ ਜਾਂ ਟ੍ਰਾਂਸਲਿੰਕ ਸੇਵਾ ਤੇ 1 ਸਤੰਬਰ ਤੋਂ ਮੁਫਤ ਸਵਾਰੀ ਕਰ ਸਕਣਗੇ। ਇਸ ਮੁਫਤ ਟ੍ਰਾਂਜ਼ਿਟ ਨਾਲ 12 ਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਘੱਟ ਉਮਰ ਦੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਪਰਿਵਾਰਾਂ ਲਈ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਵਧੇਰੇ ਵਾਰਾ ਖਾਨਯੋਗ ਹੋ ਜਾਏਗੀ। ਇਸ ਸੰਬੰਧੀ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰ ਜੌਨ ਹੌਰਗਰ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਜਨਤਕ ਟ੍ਰਾਂਜ਼ਿਟ ਦੀ ਵਰਤੋਂ ਕਰਨਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਵਧੀਆ ਚੋਣ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ। ਇੱਧਰ ਉੱਧਰ ਆਉਣ ਜਾਣ ਲਈ ਇਸ ਨਾਲ ਇੱਕ ਵਧੇਰੇ ਸ਼ੁੱਧ ਘੱਟ ਕਾਰਬਨ ਉਤਪਤੀ ਵਾਲਾ ਤਰੀਕਾ ਮੁਹੱਈਆ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਜੋ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਭਾਈਚਾਰਿਆਂ ਅਤੇ ਵਾਤਾਵਰਣ ਲਈ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਗੈਟ ਔਨ ਬੋਰਡ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਨਾਲ ਟ੍ਰਾਂਜ਼ਿਟ ਮੁਸਾਫਰਾਂ ਦੀ ਇੱਕ ਨਵੀਂ ਪੀੜ੍ਹੀ ਵੀ ਪ੍ਰੇਰਿਤ ਹੋਵੇਗੀ। ਫਿਲਹਾਲ ਵਰਲਡ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਨਿਊਜ਼ ਦੇ ਇਸ ਬੁਲੇਟਿਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੰਨਾ ਹੀ। ਹੋਰ ਤਾਜ਼ਾ ਖਬਰਾਂ ਲਈ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਰਹੋ ਚੜ੍ਹਦੀ ਕਲਾ ਟਾਈਮ TV ਨਾਰਥ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ। ਮੈਨੂੰ ਰਿਦਮ ਨੂੰ ਦਿਓ ਆਗਿਆ। ਧੰਨਵਾਦ।